Most men don't shut down because they don't care. They shut down because something inside them is trying to keep things from falling apart. From the outside, it can look like indifference, silence, emotional distance. But internally, what's happening is often the opposite. There is pressure, overload, a system working hard to stay regulated. This conversation isn't about blaming men or excusing harm. It's about understanding what conflict actually feels like inside a man's emotional system, and why shutting down can feel like the safest option available. Because for many men, conflict doesn't feel like communication. It feels like a threat to control. What conflict triggers? Inside many men, when conflict begins, many men don't experience it as a discussion. They experience it as escalation. Voices change, emotions intensify, expectations rise. Internally, the body shifts into monitoring mode. Thoughts speed up, then suddenly stall. The chest tightens. Words feel harder to access. This isn't avoidance, it's overload. Most men were never taught how to stay emotionally open under pressure. They were taught how to stay contained. So, when emotional intensity increases, the system reaches for the only regulation strategy it knows: stillness, silence, withdrawal, not to punish, not to control, but to stabilize. Most men don't shut down in conflict because they don't care. They shut down because their system is overwhelmed. Conflict doesn't feel like communication. It feels like, instability. As emotions rise, the body moves into containment. Silence becomes a way to slow things down internally, to avoid saying something damaging, to prevent loss of control. From the outside, it looks like disengagement. From the inside, it feels like survival. Shutting down isn't indifference. It's protection from overload in a system that was never taught how to stay open under pressure. How boys learn to regulate by suppressing this pattern doesn't begin in adult relationships. It starts early. Most boys learn, often unintentionally, that strong emotions create problems. Anger leads to punishment. Sadness gets minimized. Fear gets ignored. So, boys adapt. They learn to self-regulate by pulling inward, by managing emotions privately, by not needing too much. At first, this builds resilience, but resilience without reflection slowly turns into emotional distance. Over time, a quiet rule forms. If emotions rise, go quiet, stay controlled, stay safe. That rule doesn't disappear in adulthood. It shows up most clearly in moments of conflict, especially with someone they care about. Why silence feels safer then? Speaking in conflict, many men don't go quiet because they have nothing to say. They go quiet because every option feels risky. Say the wrong thing, it escalates. Say the right thing, it might still be misunderstood. Say too much, it feels like losing control. So silence feels safer than missteps. Inside, the man is scanning. What will this lead to? Will this make things worse? Can I handle where this goes? That internal calculation drains emotional bandwidth. Eventually, the system shuts down. Not emotionally, but verbally. When men shut down, it's often because every response feels dangerous. They're not withholding, they're scanning. What if this makes it worse? What if I lose control? What if I say something I can't take back? Silence feels safer than speaking under pressure. The nervous system chooses containment when expression feels unsafe. This isn't emotional immaturity, it's learned regulation. Men weren't taught how to stay open during conflict. They were taught how to hold everything in. The misunderstanding that creates distance. Here's where things start to fracture. A man believes silence is preventing harm. His partner experiences silence as absence. He thinks he's staying calm. She feels shut out. Neither intention is malicious, but the gap widens because the internal experience is invisible. Men often don't say, I'm overwhelmed. They don't say, I need a pause. They just go quiet, and silence without context gets interpreted as indifference. A small but telling moment. Imagine a man in a relationship. An unresolved issue comes up at the end of a long day. His partner wants engagement, clarity, connection. As emotions rise, his body tightens, thoughts blur, words disappear. He wants to respond, but nothing feels safe to say. So he shuts down. Not because he doesn't care, but because every response feels like it could make things worse. Many men believe confidence in conflict means staying calm. But calmness achieved through shutdown isn't calm, it's containment. When men go quiet, they're often trying to keep the situation from spiraling. From the outside, silence looks like avoidance. From the inside, it feels like restraint. Shutting down isn't emotional absence, it's emotional overload without a safe outlet. Understanding this changes how we interpret silence, not as lack of care, but lack of capacity in that moment. Why men often open up later. This also explains something many partners notice. Men often express themselves after conflict, hours later, days later, sometimes in writing, sometimes while walking or driving. That's not avoidance, that's regulation returning. Once the nervous system settles, clarity comes back. Words reappear. This is why pushing men to talk in the peak of conflict often backfires. Demand increases pressure, and pressure deepens shutdown, the fear most men never name. Underneath shutdown is a fear many men never articulate. If I open up, I won't know how to stop. They fear emotional flooding, loss of control, saying too much. So distance becomes regulation, but regulation through distance always creates separation. And over time, that separation gets mistaken for disconnection. Men don't shut down because they feel nothing. They shut down because they feel too much, too fast. Conflict activates fear of losing control, not fear of connection. Without tools to regulate in real time, the system chooses silence. Shutdown isn't the enemy. Disconnection is. And reconnection starts with safety, not pressure. What actually helps men? Stay engaged. Men don't need to be pushed to talk more. They need to feel safer while talking. Safety comes from pacing, not intensity. When conflict slows down, capacity returns. When emotional volume drops, presence increases. Men don't need to be fixed. They need permission to pause without punishment, to think without being accused, to speak imperfectly without shame. Men don't avoid conflict. They avoid dysregulation. They open up when their system feels stable again. That's why clarity often comes later, not in the heat of the moment. Silence during conflict isn't the end of communication. It's a pause for regulation. When men feel safe again, expression returns. Timing matters more than force. If this feels familiar, pause here. Not to judge yourself, but to notice. If this perspective gives language to experiences you've lived through quietly, you're welcome to stay connected to the channel. This space is about understanding, not correction. What reconnection actually looks like. Reconnection isn't emotional dumping. It's not instant vulnerability. It's small honesty. I need a moment. I don't have words yet. This feels like a lot. These aren't weaknesses. They are doors. When men learn they can stay present without losing control, shutdown softens, and presence replaces silence. Men shut down when conflict feels like a threat to control. They re-engage when it feels safe to stay present. Regulation comes before expression. Silence isn't failure, it's a signal. And when men learn they don't have to disappear to stay stable, connection becomes possible again. If you've shut down in conflict, this isn't a flaw. It's a learned survival strategy. What once kept you stable may now be keeping you distant. Reconnection isn't about becoming more emotional. It's about becoming more accessible, to yourself first, then to others. If this helped you understand yourself or someone close to you, let it settle. And if you want more conversations like this, grounded in psychology and real emotional experience, you're welcome to come back. This channel isn't about changing who men are. It's about helping them stay present without losing control.